And joining me now is the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. Mr. Secretary, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you. Good to be back.
I want to start with, for our purposes of this discussion with both yourself and Senator Wicker, who I have later, define infrastructure as this administration sees it, because we're already having a debate of, hey, bridges, roads, that's infrastructure, elder care is not. Define infrastructure in your view.
So I'd say infrastructure is the foundation that makes it possible for Americans to thrive. And what we know is that that foundation has been crumbling, whether we talk about care infrastructure or whether we're talking about roads and bridges and the other things that I work on as the Secretary of Transportation. We have fallen to 13th in the world in terms of our transportation infrastructure and continuing to head in the wrong direction because we've been failing to invest for a generation. The American Jobs Plan is our chance to fix that.
This is being broken up into two parts. This part is approximately $2 trillion. The next part being rolled out in 3 weeks is, I guess, another trillion or so. Here, is this being broken up because you think, well, all right, the bricks and mortar part of infrastructure, we can find Republican support. The social service infrastructure, we can't?
I think we can find a lot of support for all of the elements of the president's agenda. Certainly what we're seeing with the American Jobs Plan is overwhelming support among the American people. You know, in many ways, it feels like we've already convinced America. Now we just got to get Washington to follow suit. And I would note also that there's a lot of support for how the president is proposing to pay for this. That's part of why I think this is such a compelling package. We know that we as a country can afford to make big investments in infrastructure. We just need to make sure that corporations are paying their fair share. That's what this plan is going to do.
Let me start first with how long you're going to look for bipartisan support. You know, it was about this time in 2009 that President Obama and Vice President Biden rolled out a health care plan, and they spent 6 months convinced because polling told them there was bipartisan support. And individual lawmakers thought, you thought there was bipartisan support, and you ran into sort of a party brick wall there. How much time do you give to bipartisanship?
Well, the president really believes in a bipartisan approach, and it's one of the reasons I'm constantly having conversations with members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, gathering ideas. But the president also has a clear vision, and as he said, this has to get done. He's asking for Congress to make major progress on this by Memorial Day. The bottom line is we've got to deliver for the American people, and we can't let politics slow this down to where it doesn't actually happen.
You know, it looks, as from this observer standpoint, that the administration looks like it wants bipartisan support more than congressional leadership, Democratic leadership. Is their patience less than the president's?
Well, you'd have to ask them, but I believe that they are just as interested in trying to get somewhere that's a win-win. At the end of the day, yes, it's the president's belief, but it's also the belief of the American people that government works better when you got both parties actually talking to each other, negotiating, working in good faith. And that's what we're working to do around infrastructure. I mean, if there's any issue area where it could be done, surely it's this one. Now, at the end of the day, of course, it'll be up to the other side of the aisle whether they're prepared to vote for a package that maybe isn't perfect for anybody, but it's a great package. And again, now's the season for hearing any ideas they want to bring to the table. I think you'll find the president's very open to that. We've already had two Oval Office meetings with members of the House and Senate from both sides of the aisle. You can expect more of that.
Talking about paying for this plan, President Biden has one idea, right? Mostly corporate tax rates. And I know the idea is, hey, if you've got another idea, we'll listen. There's three ways to fund projects, right? There's user fees. You know, you could throw gas tax into kind of a user fee category. There's straight up corporate taxes, income taxes here. And then there's deficit spending. Does President Biden, does he guarantee that he will sign a bill that is totally paid for, or will there be some deficit spending in this bill?
Well, I'm not going to get ahead of the process in Congress, but what I will say is that the vision the president has put forward is fully paid for. Across 15 years, it would raise all of the revenue needed for these once-in-a-lifetime investments. So by year 16, you'd actually see this package working to reduce the deficit. And again, it's important to point out that the American people agree with this because we've seen corporations paying zero. We're just asking corporations to pay their fair share at a rate, by the way, that would be lower than it's been for most of my life. Now, again, if folks on the Hill have other ideas about how to pay for it, we're going to be interested to hear those ideas. But there is a clear vision to pay for this bill in full.
I was just going to say, it's not lost on me, though, that you say there's a vision to pay for this bill in full. But if a bill that funds this infrastructure project comes to the president's desk and it does not include enough to pay for this bill and its deficit spending, it doesn't sound like he would somehow veto it. I mean, is that what you're saying here? He's going to be open. If Congress decides to deficit spend, so be it?
That decision is very literally above my pay grade, and we'll see how this thing looks by the time it actually reaches the president, which we hope is quite soon. But what I'll say is we've got a great proposal for how we can do this that is responsible, that keeps the American economy competitive. But if there are other ideas, now's a great time to hear them.
Are you worried that the sense of urgency for this bill, you call this a jobs bill, right? The acronym JOBS. You guys want this to be seen as a jobs bill. We just had a tremendous jobs report on Friday. We're probably going to have a couple more months just like it, if not better, as we reopen due to the pandemic restrictions. It's natural. Do you worry that that will recede the sense of urgency for this plan and perhaps make even some Democrats hesitant to spend this much money?
No, because those jobs numbers, which are good news, still reflect an economy that's coming out of a deep hole created by the pandemic. But those are also numbers that are about this week, this month, this quarter. The American Jobs Plan is about a generational investment. It's going to create 19 million jobs. And we're talking about economic growth that's going to go on for years and years. So, yeah, the rescue plan was largely about just getting through this season, getting America back from the brink. But I want to be clear, the American Jobs Plan is not about short-term stimulus. It's about making sure that America is positioned to compete for the next decade and for the generation ahead. We know that China and our other strategic competitors are already making major investments. It's time for America to lead the way again. And those 19 million jobs we're about to create go way beyond some quarterly or monthly report. This is about our future as a country.
Do you have a vision of what is America going to look like in 2035 if you implement this plan?
Absolutely. Yeah, by 2035, America will be much more economically competitive. We'll be stronger in terms of leading the world because of the research and development investments that are here. And we will be on track to avoid climate disaster because of the provisions for things like electric vehicles. And just as importantly, because we will have made these investments here starting in 2021, those electric vehicles that more and more people around the world are driving will have been increasingly made in America by union workers. This is what you get for planning for the long term. I mean, look, right now, we're still coasting off of infrastructure choices that were made in the 1950s. Now's our chance to make infrastructure choices for the future that are going to serve us well in the 2030s and on into the middle of the century when we will be judged for whether we met this moment here in the 2020s.
All right, Secretary Pete Buttigieg, the Secretary of Transportation. Appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective with us. We'll see how long this takes. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.